Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Alright, so I have a ton of stuff to talk about, like a lot of points here. You guys can see I got a whole list. It's probably not in focus, but first off, before I get into it, I saw this movie last night. I just had there were a lot of things that I just really didn't agree with, and I'm really surprised that they screened it in front of people and they went ahead with this version of the film. I just think there's so many mistakes that are made in it. Alright, so ahead of time, there will be spoilers in this review. I'll try to let you guys know beforehand so you guys can just kind of skip through the spoiler portion of the video and get just my kind of review of it without the spoilers. Like I said, this is going to be a review, and before I get into everything, all my my bullet points that I have on here, I just really wasn't a fan of the film. That'll probably show throughout all the points, but I will point out some of the things that I did like in the film probably towards the end of the video. With all that stated, let's jump in. First off, this was my main complaint. They kind of turned the whole movie into like a comedy film. It's so unnatural how they do it. It's so forced in almost every single conversation. And this may sound like I'm being like dramatic, but it literally is almost every single conversation. They throw in like cheap one-line jokes. They'll be having a dead serious conversation, and in the middle of it, they'll just throw out some lame one-line joke. It completely takes away from the seriousness of not only the scene, but the whole movie. Because of how they set that up with all these jokes in the conversations, when you go into like another serious scene, you're kind of just waiting for them to crack a joke, and it's like, all right, why are you this is such a serious moment in the film, why are you using like this type of language here? It just does not belong there. So I will say that, obviously there are funny moments in Star Wars. It is geared towards usually like a younger audience. Comedy should be present in the film. But if you go and you look back at like episode 4, 5, and 6, which, I mean, watching episode 7, the last one that came out, you kind of notice that it gears kind of towards the 4, 5, and 6 episodes more than it does 1, 2, 3, just kind of like the overall tone. It is obviously different, but the tone is a lot closer to 4, 5, and 6. I felt that way anyway. Let's go back and talk about the characters themselves. When you look at like Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia, they're very serious characters. In episode 4, 5, and 6, Leia might be the most serious character in there. I don't think she cracks any jokes. She's always just, pretty stern. Then there's Luke, who's, really like by the rules and stuff like that, and he's also, just a very serious character. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't lighthearted moments. There definitely are. In 4, 5, and 6, there are also, some comedic moments. If you go and watch The Last Jedi, it's completely different. Like, you'll notice just the jokes. Kind of towards the end of this bullet point, I'll give some examples. There will be spoilers. Continuing with characters, talking about 4, 5, and 6, we'll move on to this episode specifically later. You look at the characters, you got Han, Leia, and Luke for like the main characters. Obviously, spoiler, Han isn't around because he died in the episode 7. If you think about it, like, obviously Han was the one who is kind of always joking around. It makes sense that if these type of lines were going to be put into The Last Jedi, like they were, that a character like Han would be saying them instead of Luke and Leia, who are just, really delivering them in like forced way. Like I said before, I'm not saying that Star Wars can't be funny. I'm just saying that this is a terrible way for them to have it. Like when R2-D2 does stuff, like he fights off the battle droids, it's just kind of funny because you wouldn't expect R2-D2 to be doing something like that. So it's funny, and they make you laugh like that. They don't give you, like some like one-line joke. Like in Rogue One, if you look at where Darth Vader, he says, "Be careful not to choke on your aspirations," and he uses a pun, which is, I think that got a lot of criticism. It didn't really fit. I was okay with that. It's Rogue One. It's really different. It's not an actual, like direct part of the series. Acknowledged as being in the same universe and everything. It is real. But, it's not the like main part of one of the trilogies. So, I thought it was alright that they're able to branch out and kind of try different things in a movie like Rogue One. So I'm going to be talking about the scenes now. This will contain some spoilers. So if you haven't seen it yet, you can fast forward. There are an endless amount of these just one-line jokes, but I'm just gonna list a couple of the big ones off that I remember off the top of my head, just to kind of give you guys an example of what I'm talking about when I say these cheap one-line jokes that are just completely littered throughout the entire movie. The first one I'm going to talk about is Luke. There's a point where he is in a battle. They try to attack him and he ends up, dodging it and not getting hurt. And he goes like this, which is just really cocky. It's not placed there to be, kind of cocky. More so placed there for comedic relief, which is already, the movie doesn't have any seriousness to it at this point because you've already just completely dismantled all the seriousness of the film by overflowing it with these satirical moments. So another scene, Luke and Leia, they get reunited, sort of. So they get reunited, and the very first thing Leia says is a joke about her hair. Now these guys haven't seen each other for years, and Leia, one of the most serious Star Wars characters, cracks a joke about her hair. The last example. Actually, well, there will be two more. So the first one is Kylo and Rey have this telepathic force connection throughout the whole movie. One scene where Kylo has his shirt off. It's a very serious talk because, you have Rey and Kylo who already have a ton of tension. They're able to kind of communicate, almost spy on each other through this force telepathic connection, which I'll get into later. So they're able to spy on each other. They're having a conversation. Kylo Ren has his shirt off, and very, very, very serious scene. Rey asks him to put a shirt on and makes a joke about it. It just doesn't belong there, and you can feel that it doesn't belong there. Next, I'm going to talk about the Luke Skywalker when he's on the island. He has completely transformed. Luke now thinks he's a comedian, and everything he does, he tries to be funny with. Totally not characteristic of him. Like I said, look back at 4, 5, and 6. He's a very serious person. Even now, after he tried to raise Kylo Ren and teach him along with the other dozen Jedi, I think that was, with what happens to all that, all the death surrounding it, obviously somebody's gonna be even more serious than before. So I just think making Luke try to be a really funny character just is very out of place for this film. Another form of comedy that they use is Yoda, and I wanna throw this in there because Yoda and Luke, they both go into isolation, and you see the change between Yoda's character between the first trilogy, or the 1, 2, 3 trilogy, and then the 4, 5, 6 trilogy. You notice how his character changes. He kind of goes crazy. He's always had kind of a light overtone, and he's joked around and stuff like that in 5 and 6. He just always jokes around, he's kind of crazy. I think he's beating R2 with a cane and stealing food from him or something. It makes sense there, because you look at the time period, he's in isolation, and he's in complete isolation on Dagobah or whatever it is. Now you look at Luke, who has also been in isolation. But it's important to note, because Luke has been in much smaller amount of time has passed since Luke has gone into isolation. Also, there are a bunch of people who live on the island that Luke's staying on, but he's not in complete isolation. That takes away from the reasoning behind his dramatic change in character being, oh, he's lived in isolation for so long. I think it's only a handful of years that have actually passed. In reality, he's not actually in complete isolation, where you look at Yoda, where tens of years passed and he was all by himself. Alright, so next topic, I'm going to be talking about the unnecessary cameos. So this might just be for me. I feel like movies, when they force somebody who's really famous into it, just specifically for a cameo, some stars oh, I really want to be in Star Wars, can you give me a role? And they're oh yeah, well, toss you a cameo. I think that takes away so much from the film. It's just really distracting, because you see that person, you're oh, that's so-and-so. So I think, I was really excited when episode 7 came out. They didn't bring in any really famous actors for the new lead roles, so I like that. There are several cameos in The Last Jedi. We're going to talk about the cameos now. I want to touch on Rogue One. I feel like Rogue One being kind of off the main set of films, it's alright for them to do other things. They tossed in the Forrest Whitaker cameo, which I really didn't like, because he had such a small role. It was just really unnecessary. But once again, I thought that was alright, because Rogue One, I kind of look at it as an experimental project for Star Wars, being the first movie that's just set alone. I thought they could experiment with it, which they clearly did. With the cameos in The Last Jedi, there are maybe 2 or 3 depending on how you look at it, that being Benicio del Toro and Justin Theroux, I believe. Benicio del Toro has a pretty minor role. He plays a code cracker. He actually fills in for Justin Theroux because they're not able to get him. Sorry if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Justin Theroux, he's just kind of like on the screen quick. Probably don't give him more than maybe a total of 10-15 seconds of screen time. He doesn't have any lines that are, you know, really important. None of them are directed towards the main characters. He's just kind of shown off in his own scene where he's being observed. My main critique about these cameos, they take a lot of attention away from the film. Seeing these, you know, these famous people where you've seen them before. And I just think it's important to find really good talent, but also, you know, kind of less known talent. Obviously, this is a difficult task. Having such a huge budget and fan base and everything, Star Wars should easily be able to do this. I believe, hopefully I'm getting this right, with the Holden lady, or the Jurassic Park lady, I guess I can just call her. She's a good actress, you know. She has decent potential. This is also like one of the kind of like a cameo, but I think he's, you know, like been out of the spotlight from Jurassic Park for long enough. Her career's not big enough, you know, I'm not like insulting her or anything. I'm just saying that she's not well known enough to draw away a whole bunch of attention from the film. So I wasn't really disappointed with her, because I don't really think that she was a cameo. More so just like an actual, you know, a decent casting decision. My main problem with her was how she acted. I thought, because in the end, her true intentions, you know, kind of come out, and her decisions are kind of not really the best ones, and then her real plan at the end kind of comes out, and it's like, well, why didn't she just, you know, make that more clear? That's kind of like a small problem. I wouldn't even really say it's a problem. It does kind of take away from her character a little bit. What does take away from her character, though, is her relationship with Princess Leia. It's hard to describe how she talked with Leia and those conversations they had. Maybe, you know, if more stuff had happened between those two, maybe their relationship could have been better explained. But just with the lack of those two actually interacting, the relationship is very, like, underdeveloped. The dialogue's really forced, and it just doesn't feel right. The last critique I have is one that you'll find in almost every film, and it's how, like, everybody besides the main characters dies. So my example, this is kind of a spoiler, not really, but sort of. Towards the end, when they get trapped inside the bunker, the deserted bunker, they have the speeders that go across the salt flat, which also, it looks like it's, you know, like, say it's this far. Using the screen time, it's like they're traveling this far. It's like a Fast and Furious runway. Kind of like the same situation that they had. Back to the original thought. They're going across, and they're just like, you know, they're just driving straight towards the bad guys because they have to blow up this cannon. Poe's out there, Finn's out there, and I think her name is Rose. So, you know, you got the three main characters, and I think they said it's like 13 of them total. It'd be different if they're, you know, actually maneuvering and stuff, but they're just literally, you know, like, just driving straight towards them. They do dodge a little bit, but I mean, with the equipment that they have, obviously Poe wouldn't be able to pull off like any amazing maneuvers like he does in the X-Wing. So that kind of takes away the reasoning behind why he would survive. It's really just looking at it through like the reality of the movie. It's just, it would just be like the only reason that the three main characters survive would be luck, because everybody else that drove off in the speeders dies. But obviously, looking at as a movie, they didn't want to kill them off because they're main characters, which, you know, I feel like at least Rose should have died there, you know, being a smaller character. They were about to kill Finn in that scene, but Rose saved him. The main characters going into that scene, coming out unscathed, not literally unscathed, but, you know, all of them are still alive. It takes away from the drama of the film. So many times in the movie, these main characters are getting themselves into what should be, you know, situations that they can't get out of, you know, like inescapable situations, but then magically they get out. Which, you know, it's true to Star Wars, you know, that's always happening. Somebody should have died, one of the characters should have died, just to add to, you know, the drama. Maybe make the viewers be like, oh, you know, somebody could actually die in like one of these next scenes if they go into something dangerous like that. So that's basically my criticism for the movie. I really wasn't a fan of it. The huge thing that I took away from it, almost every single scene, like, or not scene, but almost every single conversation had somebody just like trying to throw in a joke. They're like very serious conversation, they'll be like throwing like a little joke, and it's kind of funny. Like the jokes themselves were, you know, all right jokes, but they didn't belong in most of the scenes that they were put in, let alone every scene of the movie. You know, there shouldn't be a joke in every scene of the movie unless it's, you know, like an Adam Sandler movie or some type of comedy. You know, it doesn't belong in Star Wars. Another way that this addition of so many jokes affected the movie, I thought that it really took away from the personalities of the characters. Instead of getting, you know, stern Leia and, you know, pretty serious Luke. Leia's a comedian, Luke's a comedian, Finn's a comedian, Poe's a comedian. They all have the same personality. It just really seemed like whoever wrote all the lines for everybody, they weren't like, oh, you know, I'm gonna have like depth and characters. They were just all like written from the same perspective. It almost seemed like every character, they have their different appearances, they're played by different actors, but it seemed like all of the lines for every single character almost. The way that they added all of these lines, it just seemed like there was one personality. It seemed like all of these lines should have just been written for one character, but instead they distributed all these lines out between the entire cast. It just really didn't fit. My verdict, alright. So I obviously, all my critiques have been listed. I obviously didn't care for the movie too much. That being said, I think that it was a decent film. I think that it was entertaining. It was a little bit long for, say, like a normal movie. But I mean, looking at it, if you just went to it, you weren't going there because of Star Wars. You were just watching it because you're just watching, you know, a film. Like, say if it was a standalone film and I watched it without any like prior background knowledge and like, you know, bias and feelings towards Star Wars, I would have thought it was a decent film. Having all these movies and this just massive universe already built, I feel that this movie added on to the franchise. Like, in relation to everything else, it was maybe the worst Star Wars film that I've seen. But there were some good things about it or some things that I thought were decent about it. They do have some really awesome fight scenes. They have some pretty cool space battles. I believe it opens up with a battle where Poe is just, you know, doing his thing, being the best pilot of the galaxy. Those fight scenes really saved the movie for me. I feel like if they didn't have at least the cool action scenes that everybody wanted to see, the movie would have been way worse. I mean, it was already pretty bad. I would say that it might be my least favorite Star Wars movie. I wouldn't go and see it in theaters again if I knew all this stuff. I probably wouldn't see it again. My recommendation, you know, everybody who's watching this is probably really into Star Wars. You're probably really excited about Star Wars, and you know, you're obviously gonna go see the movie. Or maybe you're watching this after you saw the movie, which is more likely. If you hadn't seen the Star Wars film yet, if anybody's watching it and hasn't, just wait until the fight scenes go up on YouTube and just watch it like that, and then rent it once it comes out on DVD. It's not worth seeing in theaters. Really long, and you're kind of gonna cringe through a lot of it. I definitely missed out on a couple things, or there are definitely things that I didn't touch on that I could have. I hope you guys found at least some of this useful. And yeah, hopefully they make some changes for episode 9.